Hi, I'm Dr. Aneeta Madhok. I'm a coaching psychologist. I'm managing director of Open Spaces Consulting, an ex-academician and an HR professional, both in India and abroad. It has been my honor and pleasure to bring to all my audiences a great deal of subject matter expert interviews. And today we have yet another subject matter interview, as expert interview, and we are talking about a subject that is very close to my heart. It is about competency-based assessment interviewing. And how do we achieve excellence in that? So competency-based assessment interviews offer a robust and reliable method for evaluating candidates in the recruitment process. We focus on both technical and behavioral competencies, soft skills, etc. And these interviews provide a comprehensive understanding of a candidate's abilities and potential for success within a particular and specific role. The structured nature of competency-based interviews, coupled with the use of behavioral questions and STAR technique, which is a situation, task, action, and result methodology for each question and for each competency. This methodology enhances the predictive validity of the assessment. So when we use the competency-based assessment approach, we are better positioned to make informed and objective hiring decisions that align with organizations' goals and strategies. As the workplace landscape continues to evolve, competency-based assessment interviews stand out as a strategic tool for identifying and selecting top talent. So this is the subject of our conversation today, and I have for you a subject matter expert with whom I have been familiar for the last 20 plus years. So folks, I have with me today Rahul Shah. He's a subject matter expert in competency-based assessment process. And for the most part of his working life, Rahul has been a lead consultant at the DDI India, which was formerly Development Dimensions International. It's a company which is in HR world and in behavioral side. And I have been following this company for many, many years, or most of my career generally. Rahul has worked with executives from many different cultures and successfully executed global client deliveries in countries like Europe, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Vietnam, UAE, including India, of course. And sometimes even the audience for these programs ranged from non-English speaking groups to multicultural groups. So Rahul has a huge canvas of experience, especially with regard to competency-based assessments and specifically competency-based assessment interviews. So Rahul's portfolio of customers reads like Fortune 500 companies like Biocon, Dr. Reddy's, Mindtree, HCL, Flipkart, Qualcomm, DIB Bank, Mashreq Bank, Capgemini, etc., etc., etc. Even things like Walmart and Swiggy, well known to all of us. He is very passionate and energetic. I have known Rahul for more than 25 years now. And I've been following his career, and we have been colleagues, and we have worked together in the past. And he brings a lot of passion to the role of a consultant as well as when delivering workshops. Total overall experience of 24 years in training, consulting, coaching, recruitment, and sales. So that's a bit about Rahul. Rahul, we are talking to a group of people who are going to be training in interviewing skills. And then we are also going to be talking about competency-based interviewing. And later on, there would be a choice for people to go the traditional route of interviewing or to adopt competency-based interviewing. It would be their choice. Fundamentals are known. We do know that, the theoretical part, and we know about the STAR methodology, and we know about, we don't need to be convinced that competency-based talent acquisition is the best way forward. What we really need to know is how to put it in practice. Because usually, an interview is a free-flowing conversation. I am connecting with the candidate and making a based on that connection. But then I have to leave that free flow and follow a structure and a set of questions, in the STAR format. Situation, task, action, results. And how do we break the flow of that conversation and actually get into a competency-based assessment. So we'd love to hear from you, Rahul, your
Sure.
experiences.
Yeah. So I think the important thing in this, especially in competency-based interviewing process, is your rapport. I think very, very important to build that rapport. And the first 10 minutes of your initial conversation, I see very often we talk about generic things. How was your travel? Do you like to have tea, coffee, and things like that? And that doesn't really build rapport. The rapport gets built when you have looked at certain nuances in the CV worth appreciating. And you pick that up and you start by, hey, you were a college lead for basketball. That was great. How was it? And picking those instances and starting the conversation really uh, helps the candidate to ease out, because there are two people who are worried in an interview. Interviewee, of course, he or she wants to give himself herself the best impression in that moment. Even the interviewer, Aneeta, because the interviewer is worried that, will I get the best candidate? Will I be able to take off his all the mask he or she portrays in that 45 minutes? Because there are more than 5,000 training institutes who teach the candidate how to answer the question. So that puts a lot of pressure on the interviewers. And therefore, I have seen a lot of time interviewers don't prepare. They prepare when they've been told that the candidate is outside waiting. And that's when they'll print their CV. So I think the preparation time will help in identifying what are the conversation they can begin with in the first 7 minutes, 8 minutes. Because what happens is, if the interviewee feels that it's not an interview, it's a conversation, then all the guards he or she may have, the person starts relaxing that guards. And the moment that happened, you have a big win, because in competency-based interview, you're going to ask for examples. The person has to seek, identify some scenarios and share those. And for that, the comfort of the candidate is very, very important. If you don't have that comfort, the candidate doesn't open up and he'll give you monosyllable answers.
So you think the crucial part is the rapport building, and that's
It's,
what we focus on. Particularly a lot of HRBPs and line managers who are going to be watching this video need to look at rapport building skills beyond small talk, actual connecting with the human being. And once they do that, then the rest of the steps of competencies based assessments falls in place.
yeah. And I think
So,
the
so what
reason
happens
why,
after rapport building?
yeah, I think the reason I'm emphasizing a little bit on rapport building was, see, we have a lot of uh, selection errors, which we all know about. We hire the candidate and the candidate is not turns out the way we expect. But there is a chance of rejection errors, where you actually reject the right candidate because the person is not feel comfortable to open up. English is not his first language or second language. So he or she is not able to express himself or herself fully. So how do you get the best out of the interview? It's both the candidate's responsibility as well as the interviewer's responsibility. Therefore, it's both have to play that role. Yeah. So after you've done your rapport building, I would assume that you would have done your preparation to identify which competency you're looking for and identifying what are the competencies you're going to have. If by chance you have a panel, I often recommend that you pre-align with the panel, because very often I've seen the panels are not pre-aligned and both are impressing upon each other. Somebody is asking a question, the second person asking a non-related question altogether, or only one person in this panel is speaking. So pre-alignment, pre-preparation becomes a very important first thing, and then you're ready to dive right into the examples. And I often say, before you get to the examples, set the context. What is it that to expect? So because this competency-based interviewing is slightly different from normal interviews. So people often wonder, did I do well? So it's good to share, hey, what's the purpose of this conversation is how I'm gonna first ask you basic things, and then I'm gonna look for specific scenarios. And when I'm asking for scenarios, give me situations, give me specific thing what you did, and tell me how did that work out for you. So you can actually tell the person. You don't have to hide that you're looking for star. You can tell the person that this is the structure you're looking for, and then it becomes easier. There are many organizations they put online that please come prepared. These are the things we are looking for your interview, because it's important the candidate is sharp, doesn't go all over the place, because the half the time goes into getting the person to speak what exactly you're looking for, right? So that pre-setting. And second thing I often say is making sure you communicate with the person that I may interrupt. So if you pre-qualify that will happen, then you're not worried even the person is speaking too much. You can intervene because you've taken the permission to intervene because you want to get the best out of the half an hour, 45 minutes of that conversation. So make sure you communicate that, preset the conversation at those things, and of course take notes because that's very important. Is those are the hygiene things I would say you should definitely be mindful.
So there is a method and a technique and a process and it's a learnable skill, the art of competency based assessments and interviews. So do you think training helps or is it something someone can read and learn or pick up along the way? Which is better? And then sometimes only the HR business partner on the panel is the one who is trained, but the panel members are not trained.
Yeah.
So how do you really build the skill and competencies of the entire panel to be able to assess this way?
Yeah. So number one, I believe, Anita, that this is very important skill. Very often, the interviewing is handed down to us, and there are no expectation as an interviewer because nobody knows what you did in the interview. And I just want to make a point to some most of the listeners is, how many of us who know that the person who you selected and he or she is doing well, how many of us will go and say, hey, Rajesh, I hired him and look how is he doing, right? Very often we take pride in selecting the right candidate, and that pride comes and that pride becomes more sure when you actually have a structure and understanding what's the science behind interviewing. So the art of interviewing is one part which we often use, quickly judging in 5 minutes, analyzing the person, but there's a science part of it.
Yeah.
And the training helps in getting the science part of the, because you're making a decision, you're trying to predict the future. You don't know will this be a reality or not, the outcome will be true or not. That will only come when the person actually joins in. So how can you be as close to as possible to the possible result which you're expecting? And therefore it requires a training. It required competent individuals to train them so that they know what are the steps they should follow, because the skills are learned on the job. That's why people don't put so much emphasis. And it's very, very important that people should be trained. That's definitely one thing I would emphasize on.
The training does help. Now, my next question is, candidates who come for interviews, they love to window dress. Their resumes are all window dressed. They love to talk about themselves and present themselves in a positive light. Something like, what you put on Facebook, it's not the true reality. And it's natural human nature for us to window dress our appearances and our images. So, what are your tips to potential interviewers through the art of competency-based interviewing to know and learn whether they're being authentic or they're just projecting this image of success?
And this is so important, Anita, because we all have a tendency to show our best side of us, right? So I've seen a lot of time when you ask for weakness, the person will say, "Oh, I do a lot of work. I'm workaholic, so that's my weakness." So they'll try to portray the strength in their weakness, right? So that's the orientation, and that's been trained. So you have to also look out for those. I don't say like immediately become alert. So is it your strength? Are you saying the truth? Sometimes interviewers can become very stiff in that. So you have to understand and relax because where they are coming from. You don't have to show up yourself that you understand. But pattern recognition is what I would call out, where I would write those information down. And when I'm asking for competency with deeper questions, when I'm seeking examples, you'll realize the time management is often a common missing link for this person, right? And you may say, hey, you said earlier that you like workaholic. And in prioritization questions I asked you, you said always there was one of the reason why you were not able to complete your work. What's the connection there? How can you relate that? So making those connections while you're writing, because see, I believe interviewing is gathering information. Very often, our role as an interviewer is to listen carefully. But the problem happens is we're so used to evaluation, Anita, that we start judging people in the moment. Whatever the person is saying, oh, go, no go is going in our head. And
Yeah.
that's not, we are not gonna, the moment he or she is out, we are not saying, okay, reject or select. You'll have time to evaluate that. Your role is gathering the information. So when you're gathering the information, therefore you write down, circle those points, which seems very artificial to you, because initially the person will put all the guards. But after some time, often use this word, question I asked them. So, how did you feel about managing this task on your own? And I realized suddenly, from a cognitive zone, they move into emotional side. And the moment they move from that cognitive zone to emotional side, their guards are relaxed and they become more subjectively in the conversation. Then they're not thinking and talking, they're just talking. And that's a big win for the interviewer because they will slightly see the person opening up
Yeah.
slowly person. And that's when you'll see differences in terms of the patterns. You will see people maybe actually contradicting himself or herself. And that's where your data is. That's where you want to follow up and ask more questions or check, is the person, there is a truth, or he or she is just faking to make it.
Wow. So yeah, so you connect the dots and you look for all the information that goes well together, and any information that sticks out, and you go verify that, and then that's how you can tell what's real and what's probably the window dressing part of it. Great. So, but we talked about panel interviews a little while ago, and we always see that is done in panels, and there are different levels of interviewing capability across the panels. So, usually, and I've seen this everywhere I go, including I've been part of so many interviews, in many organizations. So each person on the panel will take his time for doing the interviews. It's not like we're acting as a team. Each one is doing the individual questioning, individual question. And then by the time the HR business partner's turn comes, which is usually last, he gets very little time to really ask any questions. And ends up asking questions, what is your CTC and where do you live and how would you, negotiate on a salary or whatever. Those discussions begin. So how do you get the HR BP to take an active role in breaking this kind of, these silos between
Hmm.
the line manager and the,
Yeah.
so that they act in tandem with each other?
Yeah. And
Your suggestions.
that's a tough one, Anita, because I've seen, and I don't want to typecast HRBP, but there is a fact that we have to earn our seat on the table. That's what I would say. And sometimes we are our own enemy in terms of positioning ourselves and making sure that we're credible. Because very often the myth is that if the person is technically sound, the person is good. And that's not the case because
So we
the
know that.
behavioral skills are equally important. So therefore, a lot
Even
of
the
times,
line managers know that.
yeah, they
They
know
know.
it, but what happens is when they select basis the technical skills, and the HR often becomes the guardian in many organizations because they know competency-based interviewing, but they don't pitch themselves
Yeah.
because of the fear, courage. Because what I have seen in my experiences, two different HRBPs, one would actually sit in those conversations saying, no, I feel this person is not capable because look at the three examples he gave. Look at his past data. So she actually concretely put her point with case situation and pointing specific anecdotes what the candidate said because she had copious notes
Yeah.
and she is pushing back. On the other side, there's an HRBP person who's saying, oh, he may not be successful in a very generic information because his salary is too high, he's too high on the on from the peer, he's not worked consistently in similar organization. So the weightage the person HRBP carries in the entire process, dilutes. I think we have to push ourselves to capture good information, even the technical rounds, if we can pick up a pattern, and then use that space to share feedback of what you think. Because the projection of HRBPs are very weak from a role point of view. And we may have to double click on that. And if we don't double click, we will get sidelined, and that questions which they've been asked in the end have no meaning, no weightages. So then why should we give that space? to
You
HR.
know, I've seen this tendency more in India, in our country, because we have a lot of what we call service orientation.
Yeah,
HR business partner has to be of service and has to facilitate and has to make sure that the process is followed and everything is done without necessarily adding to the
correct.
to the pool of data or to the decision. We have to
And then,
facilitate a decision. So we get caught with that service orientation rather than
yeah,
take the initiative. I've seen, in other countries, the HR people are generally able to hold their own, in a panel. Whereas
yeah.
in India, it doesn't happen, and that's the general cultural
It
difference.
is. It is. And I think we have to push that bar. And I'm seeing some of the people who are pushing it by communicating the importance of it. They're showing the value, right? Because I've seen HRs who go on Reiki, who go on the ground with their field staff to see what the line managers' roles are, what they have to do. So they roll up the sleeves themselves and become at the forefront of that particular function or the group, and the group and the function sees them that they are the extension to my function only. They are not somebody from the HR. So I've seen people who guide, like functional leaders, have reached out to HRBPs and to for guidance, and that's a big win. So till the time you will not get to that credibility, you are actually doing a disservice than doing a service orientation, which you talked about.
Yes, yes, that's very true. You put it out so well, Rahul. It's really good insight that you've generated here. I have one question. The cost of poor hire is very high. I mean, you've taken on this person and he doesn't, from day one, he's struggling to fit in. He's got the technical capabilities, everything. And he passed all the technical functional competencies. We didn't get a chance to assess him behaviorally. We hired him because the reporting manager said he's technically sound. And then, the guy's struggling and go through probation, somehow gets put on a PIP perhaps, or somehow, 1 year down the line, it's obvious that, there's no, nothing going for this person. So it's a cost of poor hire. Who's to blame? I don't know whether it's HR that's responsible or the reporting manager, or it's the whole panel, but the blame game goes on. I didn't hire him, you did, and you approved it. But what are some of these typical pitfalls that happen in a competency-based assessment interview that we can prevent this kind of poor hires from happening?
So I think there are a series of them. One is the funneling approach. If I go back to the selection process, where does the selection process come in? Very often I see the functional interviews comes very early.
Yeah.
Ideally, they should be at the rejection zones, and later on when you funnel the candidate, because today we don't have per candidate, the time is very less because everyone is actually, you're overusing interview time as the selection process. But ideally, those should only funneled candidates should come at that stage. And if you're spending those time only on technical rounds, then you're losing out because you're not, those should be a pre-rejection criteria. And the senior the role, Aneeta, I'm sure the more behavioral conversation needs to happen, right? So therefore, that competency-based interviewing, understanding the competencies. A lot of times, I see people have just read broadly, and they don't understand what those competency means: entrepreneurship, decision making, influencing, understanding what the key behaviors I'm looking for. Do I understand that? Then the questions which are connected to that, are they eliciting the examples which we are looking for? Otherwise, you might have a lot of rejection in from a selection standpoint, right? So those are the things we should, and preparation, because have you done some mocks? Do you know how to do competency based interviews? It's a very detailed process where the follow up questions is the most important. It's not that the first question you asked would tell me a time when you had too many things to do together. How did you go about managing it? Just the one question will not get us to the, so it's like stars with a lot of A's in it. Action, action, action. That's only will get us the data. Like if we get the enough data, then we'll be able to evaluate the data. If we don't have enough data, then you are evaluating broadly on impressions. Then you can make errors quite strongly, right? So those are the things, biases. I think that's another thing which is a big no. We don't understand our own biases. The person says, and Aneeta, it happens, right? When I'm from NMIMS and somebody says I'm an ex-alumni NMIMS, suddenly I have a oxytocin in my body, which is a feel-good chemical because I start having association similarity, connect. And through that biases makes me judge the person more, more less analytically, right? So we have to be aware of our unconscious bias, gender biases. There's so many biases, and a lot of study has happened on biases. These are mental shortcuts or unconscious biases, what we have to be careful. I think those becomes a big pitfall. And sometimes I've seen, even if you're a competency-based interviewer, and if you're not conscious, you're overconfident. You can get very overconfident. Oh, I've done so many interviews over a period of years. I will, within 15 minutes, I'll be able to scan the individual. That's not true. Candidates are becoming more mature. Their ability of also to give you very answers are also becoming mature. So therefore, your preparation, your analysis, you cannot do in 15 minutes. Minimum half an hour to 45 minutes takes for a good interview to happen. If you cut that down for any reason, it doesn't work. And then evaluation should not be dependent only on one individual. It should be more than one set of eyes, because very often we may get subjected. So these are safety nets. If you're more individuals who have seen the same candidate for different competency, you divide that, then your chances of making error also goes down. That's what I would say. Yeah.
So it has to be a collective decision. And I've seen very often, the assessment sheets, everyone holds all the ones on the panel, they hold their assessment sheets and they write their answers and they don't share with each other, which I think is so counterproductive because you're just getting the average of the scores given by the people on the panel. Whereas once the interview is over, I do believe the panelists should discuss and debate and spend as much time on the interview as perhaps, on the decision, and continue to evaluate through a consensus mode, considering all the information everybody's captured. So that's my perspective on that one pitfall. There are, of course, many other pitfalls, nervous candidates and so many others, but these are the very essential points you have covered. Um, I've been doing assessments almost all my life of different kinds, including interviewers, including psychometric, including so many, competency-based and otherwise. I feel that there is a lot of malpractice as far as ethical boundaries is concerned.
Mhm.
So what do you feel are the ethical guidelines and the top 2 or 3 things that tend to go wrong ethically in a competency-based assessment?
Mhm. I think that's a very important thing, given the fact that these are all confidential in nature. I think that's one important thing we all understand. People are bearing themselves and they're sharing their perspective. I've seen great organizations use these data to onboard, because this is good information getting early on. But you have a tendency to misuse as well, because the person is onboarded and you have a lot of information about his weaknesses. How do you then, how careful are you making sure you don't make statements which can be derogatory and defamatory? And we also have to understand that we are living in a global world. And candidates can come from anywhere, any parts of the country, any background, any ethnicity. So, how sensitive are you? Because in India, there are not strong legal norms, but globally, there are a lot of legal norms as well. One wrong question which you ask, and if it doesn't land in the way the person is receiving it, you are subjected to case and things like that. So you have to be very careful in those areas. Following up on personal areas, you're asking your follow-up questions more and more deeper into personal zones, age-related questions, gender-related questions. I think all those are, you have to be very careful in making your conversation, because we believe we can get away with it. Today with social media, people record or people put anything on about you, and
Yeah.
people remember, by the way,
And it's
the
the
bad interviews.
glass door effect.
Glassdoor, yeah, yeah. People remember bad interviews, and if it's put on the social media, it has a big reputation risk from an organization brand standpoint. So you have to be very conscious on some of these things, Aneeta.
And today, a large chunk of the population that we are hiring from comes from the Gen Z and also now Gen Alpha is coming in. And they have a very different set of privacy norms, ethical norms, which they would take a lot of affront. And for them, the image of the company where they're going is very important too.
Very important, and therefore fair assessment. people expect fair assessment would happen.
Mhm.
So, are you hiding too much that, okay, what are the steps? What are the process? So I see some of the organizations are very clear and transparent. They tell you what are the steps, what are the steps before, how would we evaluate, will you get a call or you not get a call, you'll get a communication. So are you fair and transparent to the extent possible? I think that's also important. Otherwise, people will misjudge the process.
So, any last message you want to give my audience, Rahul?
I think I personally believe this selection is the most important. Like, I feel people are standing in the door of the organization, literally, and you are the gatekeeper who's going to come in the organization, who's not going to come in the organization. So I would say, as if you're an interviewer or part of the panel, you have to take your role very, very seriously. It's a very serious responsibility. Organizations which are high performing organizations like your PNG or Amazon, Google's have 6 to 8 rounds of interviews because they want to keep the candidate average number of the years person should spend in the organization should be 5+ minimum, right? So that should be our goal. How
Yeah.
do I become the conduit? And am
Yeah.
I doing my role very well? So I think that's what I would say. It's a very, very important role, and all the very best on this transition of
So,
new skills.
HRBPs who take themselves seriously also take talent acquisition seriously.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
ultimately, it's about moving the wheels of the organization through the people, talents that we carry. Thank you so much, Rahul. It was amazing. I love the energy with which you speak, and you really added so much perspective, and it was a very synergistic conversation. Thank you so much, and I'm really truly grateful to you. And I hope we meet soon, perhaps as soon as tomorrow. Who knows? All right. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Aneeta. Thank you for